Hello and welcome. This is Crazy's Casual Corner, and I am your host, Crazy, and this is my corner. Today, we are talking about a game called Final Fantasy XV. The way we will do this is relatively simple. I played through the game in any style that I decided to go with. While doing so, I took notes from beginning to end on any thoughts or opinions I may have had while playing. And now, I will go through those notes and have some afterthoughts to end off our time here in the corner. All you have to do is be my receptive listeners, as you always have been. To start off our time here together, depending on how I felt at the time, my notes tend to vary wildly in both scope and detail, and the style of which I took them. I will do my best to clearly convey what my thoughts were to you, the audience, in the most concise way I can possibly muster. Now, let's take a dive into my mind whilst experiencing the game and get a view into my perspective. When I began the game, I was given a choice whether or not I wanted to partake in the tutorial. I ultimately decided to do the tutorial. I was a little iffy at first if I wanted to do the tutorial, but in the end I was glad to do it because it was very in-depth and it even included some lore to sink my teeth into before I even got into the game. When I finished biting into the tutorial and went into the actual game, it did something that other games and even movies do, which was show a glance of the end in the beginning to get you hooked into it, and then shove you into the start of the story in a variety of different ways. While I was playing, I found that I was a fan of this and was immediately hooked into it. After my brain was so easily hooked to that shiny fish hook, it ran its course deeper into my mind because right in the beginning, I was introduced to the main cast personalities. Noctis, the edgy cool guy. Prompto, the impatient but fun-loving one. Ignis, the smart and astute rule follower. And Gladio, the strong, reliable bad boy. I was hooked on because of how they were each different in their own way, and I liked the differences between them and how they interact. Now, my apologies for waiting so long to give these obligatory warnings, but nevertheless, that being said, as I am going down my notes, they will evolve as I went through the game, and my notes are any time that I had a specific thought about literally anything I felt like. So, with that on the table, there will be gaps in between my notes, so there will be jumps in the video. With me taking notes at any time and about anything in the game, here's your spoiler warning. Now that we have that out of the way, we can move forward. In the game, there are points where you can rest, and Ignis, one of our main party of 4, can cook the group some food to eat. I thought the food looked delicious, and I couldn't help wanting a bite of everything he happened to make. While moving forward, Prompto will occasionally take automated pictures of pretty much anything. Combat, resting, car rides, etc. And having him do that as a game mechanic made me feel like he was actually there with me along for the long journey we had ahead of us. While on this journey, on the other hand, I found myself getting very distracted by different ingredients that you can grab around the world, so I could see more food that Ignis could cook up. When roaming around the world, I came face to face with all types of different monsters, with varying strengths, and even if I had to avoid a few of them, I found that I enjoyed the fact that there were optional big and high-level monsters to go attack, other than the main story. It let me decide when I wanted to get my butt kicked. As I continued through the game, I took note of the feature that everyone has different skills, and that it adds a really nice touch that brings all their personalities together. Noctis with his fishing, Gladio with his survival, also known as camping, Ignis with his cooking, and Prompto with his photography. Having all their hobbies take a pretty big spot in the game really wrapped up their personalities as characters and made me feel more attached to them than I would normally be to other characters in different games. Oh, And I mustn't forget that I chose this color for the rims of my car, for obvious reasons. Speaking of the car, while you play this game, that is the main mode of transportation, other than walking. And I really did enjoy the car rides in between areas, as the main cast would interact with one another, and it let me see the sights of the game as well, and let me take it all in. I did want to make a point to say that playing this game is like having the boys with you. The main cast, while playing through this game, takes the spotlight here, as their interactions with each other, along with their personalities, makes this feeling complete, as their brotherly bond is really what did it for me. And it makes the whole game feel like one big adventure with the boys. To reinforce this thought is the combat, as when in combat, it really made me feel like I had the boys at my back, making little quips and fighting together and looking out for one another. And I have not found another game with quite the same feeling as this one. That being said, combat is a little janky. Like the targeting is not very consistent and a few other things, but it's livable and I ended up just getting used to it as I went through my experience. If you do not skip over the cutscenes in the game, you will be in for a very sweet treat, as the cutscenes are very pretty and definitely worth your attention. To pack on even more features that I happen to enjoy about the boys is the fact that on occasion the boys will take you aside and ask questions or start up a conversation, and I like that as well. I really happen to enjoy that interaction that they had with the player. Also, when you are at camp and leveling up, while the menu is up in the background, I got to see the boys chilling and talking. I found this added detail to be a very nice touch. So far, these notes have been fairly positive, but now we are stumbling upon our first few sour notes. As in the game, they have jump be the same button as interact by default, and that wasn't great. I kept jumping over and over again. Although, I don't think Past Crazy thought to see if he could change the controls and just lived with it. Furthermore, on occasion, combat can be fairly broken and you end up getting hit multiple times over and over, getting you stuck in a combo lock, unable to escape. Now, in the notes, it appears we are past the little sour bump and back to positivity, as I gain the ability to actually fast travel instead of having to drive everywhere. And I found that having the ability to fast travel by spending a little cash is a nice convenience. But if you were to use it too much, I'd feel it would take away from the experience of the game. As while you're driving around, especially to story locations, the boys will talk, joke, and laugh with one another. And if they have anything to say regarding the location, they will certainly do so. While playing, I did notice that all the animations for your character felt nice and weighty, like you were an actual person, which I found refreshing, because the recent games I've been playing don't exactly have that feel to them when controlling your character. Yet another convenience that I happen to enjoy when discovering things is the fact that while you're driving around the world, you can access a quick shop to buy potions and a few other useful tidbits. And while you are in the shop menu, the game does not pause, allowing you to near your destination while you take time to shop, which I found to be a very nice touch, especially since most games do not do that, at least the ones I've played. Now, this is specific to my playthrough, but if you play like I did, you will have some money trouble, as I was fairly poor for a while, because evidently I didn't eat my side quests. So my advice to you, dear listener, is to eat your side quests, kids. There are two modes of driving you can do while going to destinations, which is auto, where Ignis drives for you, or manually, where you drive. And when I chose manual, I found the driving to be rather restrictive, so I usually let Ignis drive, so I could enjoy the drive. Because when driving manual, it kind of sticks you in the road, and you can't freely drive around like in a game such as Grand Theft Auto. At this point, it looks like I discovered the giant boss fights you can have in the game, and all I said about them were they were simple, but they were very fun. So at the very least, I mentioned them. Apparently, I was feeling a little impatient or something, but there was a part of the game where you lose your car for a while, and for me, it dragged a little, especially after the intense fight before that. So I guess I was just feeling the dopamine drop, and that's what dragged for me as I was sprinting everywhere. Although, when I discovered the animation for summoning the gods that aid you in the game, they were very clean, and I wished I saw more of them. Okay, so at this point in my notes, they kind of took a wild turn and are very short, so my apologies continuing forward as I am grasping at straws trying to view my own perspective. Initially, I had a boss fight with an enemy officer who wielded a spear and jumped around a lot. Apparently, throughout the story so far, Pass Crazy put this fight as his least favorite at this point. After that fight, I guess I was fairly perturbed, as when on a drive with Iris, I believed there were too many optional yes or no stops, and to be fair, at the end of this ride, you were basically saying goodbye to Iris for a long while, but I just didn't seem to care. Coming up is a dungeon that I made note of because you had to wait until nighttime for the door to open, and there weren't any rest points nearby that I knew of to skip the time, so I made sure to put that I did not appreciate waiting outside this door all that time. Even when I went into the dungeon, I was starting to see that I was under level, and all I had to say about that was, oh well. Spoken like a true crazy, I suppose, but still. Remember to eat your side quests, kids. Don't turn out to be this guy. While I was in that same dungeon, I made some other little side notes, such as a comment on how fighting big enemy groups is not very fun with the lock-on system, which I can see because the lock-on system is more or less automatic, and while there is a kind of way you can manually lock on to something, it's still rather janky. Along with that comment, though, is another one saying that I'm so glad I brought so many potions, which I guess mean being under level and fighting groups was starting to take its toll. Here is another helpful piece of advice from this playthrough. Remember to save often. And I say this because it looks like I wasn't prepared for the boss at the end of the dungeon, and I got a game over and had to both wait for the dungeon to open again, but I also had to do the whole dungeon over again. That, let me remind you, I was completely under level for. This is a lovely example of how stubborn I can be, as I didn't take the opportunity to say, I don't know, do a side quest or two? No! I just brought some more stuff like a little better equipment and potions and powered through it. And all I had to say about that was, preparing and getting better weapons sure makes going through the dungeon again easier. Which, yeah, of course it does. Moving through this, you may wonder if this time we have together might turn into me giving Pass Crazy some sass. And well, you might very well be right. Even if it does, can you really blame me? I mean, Pass Crazy made a note to say that he accidentally sold all of his revival items and had to buy them back. So, I think I have the right to sass him. Whew. Anyway, look at his face. Looks amazing, right? Yeah, okay, cool. Moving on. Before you ask, yes, Pass Crazy made a note of this. That's why it's here. We hit a milestone, my dear listeners. We found Pass Crazy's favorite fight. It was the fight with the Leviathan god. I mean, can you blame him? Look at this. I mean, it's just beautiful. Okay, so I don't enjoy vegetables, but I don't like swamps either. they're nasty, and visibility is low, and I happen to get lost fairly easily. So of course, when I'm greeted with an enemy that looks like my worst nightmares and a Brussels sprout had a baby, I make a note of it saying the Marlboro is really gross. And that is all I have to say about that. So I found out that out of everyone, one of my favorite characters in the game is Ardyn. He's the main villain of the game, and I really enjoyed every second he was on screen. He's tactical, cold, and quirky in all the right places. They absolutely filled this man with personality. Oh yeah, and he also did this.
On second thought, you let him have it.
There is, on the other hand, a mission in the game where you take the car on a high-speed driving trip, where at the end of it you lose your car because it gets way too damaged and you have to leave it behind. And I do have to say that losing it hurt more than I thought. I mean, I guess I attached myself to it subconsciously, as it took me and the boys everywhere, and I had many memories with it throughout our journey. In terms of weapons, I found that while pretty ineffective, the ring that you got to use in the game to absorb health from enemies was pretty cool to use because of the cool effect and the anime pose you took while using it. Alright, so there was a boss fight against an enemy officer named Ravis, who got killed and brought back to life by Ardyn, the main villain. You know, this guy.
You let him have it.
So, as I was saying, I was way under level for the Ravis fight. He was level 44 while I was level 34. And to boot, he had tons of health and most of our attacks he resisted. So that fight took a lot of resources and a bit of time. And yes, I was still poor, so it did hurt my wallet. Speaking of a hurting wallet, right before the final battle, I had 5 gil to my name. Poor to the very end. Remember to eat your side quests, kids. At the very end of the game, it was a big punch in the heart, as at the end of it, you're fighting some insane enemies, and each of your boys gets their own special kill move with them each. And afterwards, you go and have to face Ardyn alone. And when you beat him, you have to continue with your preordained destiny as king and sacrifice yourself for the greater good to save the world. And after you do so, the game goes through all of your memories with the boys and the people you met along the way in your journey, and it really just hit me in the right spot. You'd have to experience it for yourself. Finally, we make it to the end of my notes, where I say, it really did feel like an adventure with the boys. To which I say, it did. Throughout the whole game, your foundation was the boys. Whenever you needed help, guess who was there? Yeah, it's the boys. In the beginning of your journey, they were there with you, and they also saw you off at the end of it as well. To conclude our time together, we will now go through some afterthoughts and final opinions, if I have any in this instance. As far as the game goes, it's definitely worth a play if you've never played it before. And even if you have played it before, I say it's definitely worth a replay. It was fun and it kept me interested as I went through it. There were also minimal problems as I went through it, which makes it very nice because it stays consistent and keeps you in the mindset and emotional range the game is trying to convey to you. My playthrough, on the other hand, definitely had some effect on the challenges I ended up having to face. Like my wallet, for instance. Any game can be played in any way, and this is how I went through it this time. So I look forward to hearing how your journey went. But unfortunately, dear listener, our time together is now coming to an end. But don't be sad, as the corner is always available to you. So even if I myself am not here, at the very least, you will have past Crazy to keep you company. So feel free to come by and hang out. And if you'd like to, feel free to leave your own thoughts in the comments below. I'd like to hear from you. And as always, Just remember that I appreciate all of you, and I'm proud of each of you. I hope you're having a good time whenever you're listening, and thank you for stopping by. I'll see you next time. Goodbye.